Hello, my name is Pratik and welcome to another video. For those who are new to this channel, I would inform you that I teach through a method which is known as the scientific method. क्योंकि you will be becoming future scientists, इसीलिए learning through this method is very important. This method helps you apply the knowledge that you gain, helps in critical thinking, analyzing and reasoning. So after this video, I would recommend कि आप वो video देखो about the scientific method. Like in every video, we become different types of scientists that helps us in understanding the concepts very clearly. So today also we are scientists. We are pollination ecologists. Pollination ecologists are those scientists who study करते हैं the process of pollination very carefully. So let us begin with the video. जो हमने शुरू में देखा, that was our first step. That was our observation. हमने observe करा कि this was the problem which has to be solved. Now the next step in scientific method is background research, जिसमें we learn about different concepts and topics. We see different works done by different scientists. So अब हम समझेंगे in detail about the different topics and concepts. In the previous video, हमने देखा that what are male gametes and what are female gametes. अब a question arises: what happens to the male and the female gametes once they are formed? There is a process जिससे कि the male and the female gametes they come together. This process was studied by different scientists. Let us see what is this process. Now you can see there are two plants and they have two flowers. These are hibiscus flowers. If you see a hibiscus flower, उसमें you will see यहाँ पे that these structures are very much visible. And this upper part is the stigma. और ये वाला these are the pollen grains. अब इस process में what happens is the pollen grains which have the male gametes वो एक flower से दूसरे flower पे transfer होते हैं. This is how the pollen grains they get transferred to the female reproductive part of the flower, and that structure display the pollen grain gland. It is the stigma, and this process is simply known as pollination. Scientists ने जब ये process discover करा, they also found out that ये जो process है, it does not occur in one single way. इसके different types हैं, different ways हैं जिससे कि pollination happens. So let us see the different types of pollination. There are two major types of pollination. One is self-pollination and another is cross-pollination. So there are two types of pollination. One is self-pollination and another is cross-pollination. Let us understand पहले what is self-pollination and how does it happen. यहाँ पे this is a plant. It has these flowers. You can say these resemble hibiscus flowers. अब self-pollination में होता क्या है? That pollen grains from the anther they get transferred to the stigma of this flower. मतलब एक ही flower के अंदर there will be the transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma, and then the further processes will take place. या फिर there will be another case कि pollen grains from this anther they will get transferred from this flower to the stigma of another flower on the same plant. We can say that self-pollination is the transfer of pollen grains from the anther of a flower to the stigma of either the same flower जो कि यहाँ पे था on the same flower or genetically similar flower. There is a question कि what does this word genetically mean? What does this mean कि to transfer to a genetically similar flower? Genetically similar flower का मतलब है जो एक ही प्लांट पर हो या एक जैसे प्लांट्स के जाए. जैसे फॉर एग्जांपल एक मदर प्लांट के सारे बच्चे प्लांट्स वो एक जैसे दिखते हैं, वैसे ही एक प्लांट के फ्लावर्स भी एक जैसे होते हैं. उनमें बहुत मिलती जुलती चीजें होती हैं, इसीलिए उन्हें genetically similar कहा जाता है. There are different types of self-pollination. First is autogamy and second is geitonogamy. हम इन दोनों टाइप्स को देखेंगे further. अब let us understand what is cross-pollination. In cross-pollination, let us take two plants. अब इसमें होगा क्या? Nothing complex. ये plant A है and ये plant B है. From the anther, the pollen grains from the flower of A plant, it gets transferred to the stigma of another flower of a different plant. This is the plant B. तो from A to B this जब pollen grain gets transferred, this is the known as cross pollination. This is known as cross pollination. So we can say that in cross pollination there is the transfer of pollen grains from anther of one flower to the stigma of a genetically different flower. यहाँ पे it is important that the pollen grains they transfer to a different flower, a genetically different flower. तभी it would be known as cross pollination. Cross pollination में the type which we will be studying is known as xenogamy. Xenogamy. अब हम देखेंगे these types of pollination. First we will know about autogamy. In autogamy what happens is simply there is the transfer of pollen from the anther to the stigma of the same flower. This is important कि जो pollen grains हैं they get transferred from the anther to the stigma of the same flower. अब ये जितना सुनने में easy लग रहा है but ऐसा होता नहीं है. It is not the case क्योंकि it is rare. Autogamy is rare क्योंकि in autogamy there is something, a phenomena which happens, which is very important and very crucial for the pollination to happen. And this phenomena is known as synchrony. अब ये synchrony है क्या? Synchrony is nothing but जब pollen grains release होंगे from the anther and to land on the stigma it should be ready to receive the pollen grain at the same time. मतलब कि there should be no delay. Both the processes should happen at the same time. They both should have the perfect time. इसी को synchrony कहते हैं. There are different examples जिसमें autogamy happens, जैसे कि peas plants, rice, wheat, etc. अब next is diatonogamy. Diatonogamy में what happens is the basic principle: pollen grains from this flower they will get transferred or they will get moved to the stigma and land to the stigma of another flower. So simply diatonogamy में there is transfer of pollen grains from a flower to another flower of the same plant. So in diatonogamy there is transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of another flower of the same plant. This is important. Now there is an important thing which we have to understand. कि अब हम इसके बाद देखेंगे कि in cross pollination what happens is there is transfer of pollen grains from one flower to another flower, but that is of a different plant. But यहाँ पे जो transfer of the pollen हो रहा है that happens from a flower to another flower of the same plant. अब there is something which is very important to understand कि in diatonogamy, but पहले in short जान लेते हैं what is cross pollination, जो कि अब हम next देखेंगे. Cross pollination is simply the transfer of pollen grain from one flower of a plant to another flower of another plant. And ये जो transfer of the pollen है ये direct नहीं होता. It involves different agents जिससे कि there is the transfer of pollen from one plant to another. इन agents के बारे में भी we will see further. But अभी के लिए just remember what is cross pollination. Now see carefully. कि in diatonogamy what is happening is जो pollen grain है that is getting transferred from this flower from the anther of this flower and landing on the stigma of another flower. देखा जाए तो this is actually like cross pollination. The pollen is moving from one flower to another flower. But the difference is कि the pollen transfer हो रहा है वो same plant पे ही हो रहा है. Same plant पे जितने भी flowers हैं उसी plant पे हो रहा है. Not कि इस plant से एक और किसी और plant पे. It is happening on the same plant. So we can say that functionally it is like cross pollination क्योंकि there is transfer of pollen from this flower to this flower जो कि same plant पे है and it occurs by different agents जैसे कि insects वगैरह. But as we are scientists, so you need to think very carefully. You need to analyze इस चीज को कि functionally this is like cross pollination. But यहाँ पे देखो ये जो plant है this is a single plant and इसी पे there are flowers. So ये जो pollen move करेगा from this flower to this flower, this will be on the same plant. And इसको we can say that genetically this process, this diatonogamy, it looks like autogamy क्योंकि it is on the same plant. This is something you should pay attention and think and analyze very carefully. अब हम next major type of pollination देखेंगे which is the cross pollination. Cross pollination is transfer of pollen grains from the anther of one flower to the stigma of another genetically different flower. मतलब कि in cross pollination there is the transfer or the pollen grains they move from one flower of a plant to the flower of another plant. अब ये जो word है genetically इसका meaning क्या होगा? Let's say for example आपके पास एक book है, कोई भी book है. Let's say ये NCERT की biology book class 12. नाउ व्हाट यू डू इज यू टेक दिस बुक एंड अगर आप इस पूरी बुक की फोटोकॉपी करो हर एक पेज की, तो व्हाट हैपेंस इज द ओरिजिनल वन और ये जो फोटोकॉपी वाली थी, दे बोथ आर एक्चुअली सेम। सब कुछ इसमें सेम होगा, द टेक्स्ट, पिक्चर्स, सब कुछ सेम होगा, देयर बी नथिंग डिफरेंट। बट इन अनदर केस आपके पास ये वाली बुक है एनसीईआरटी की अभी लेटेस्ट वाली, एंड अगर आप किसी शॉप से पुरानी एनसीईआरटी की बायोलॉजी क्लास 12 की बुक्स उठाओ, दे विल बी एक्चुअली डिफरेंट, क्योंकि उसमें जो कंटेंट है अभी तो रैशनलाइज हो गया, अभी तो कट हो गया, but there was more content in that book. So there will be changes between these two books. Maybe there is some printing error उस वाली बुक में, maybe there is some other defect. तो ये जो दो बुक्स होंगी, आपकी वाली और दूसरी वाली, they will be different. होगी तो similar, but they will not be exactly the same. There will be some differences, but वो एक ही टाइप की बुक होगी, which is क्लास 12 बायोलॉजी एनसीईआरटी। यही प्रिंसिपल क्रॉस पॉलिनेशन में यूज होता है। मतलब जो स्पीशीज होंगे, स्पीशीज ऑफ द फ्लावर्स, दे विल बी सेम, बट genetically they could be a little bit different. Type of pollination which comes under cross pollination is known as xenogamy. In xenogamy what happens is there are two different flowers, genetically different flowers. इसमें क्या होगा, this is plant A, this is plant B. यहाँ पे from the plant A, ये जो anther है, ये जो pollen grains है on the anther of the flower of plant A, they will get transferred, they will move to the and land to the stigma of plant B का flower. So this is what cross pollination. ये जो फ्लावर होगा वो होगा तो सेम स्पीशीज का ही, बट इट विल बी जेनेटिकली डिफरेंट, इट विल बी अ लिटिल बिट different and pollination will take place. So xenogamy can be defined as the transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of a different plant, and it brings genetically different types of pollen grains to the stigma of another flower of another plant. अगर आपको कहीं भी डाउट हो, आप कमेंट में पूछो, एंड आई विल एम्फसाइज दिस दैट यू नीड टू आस्क क्वेश्चंस। थिंक अबाउट व्हाट यू स्टडी, नॉट जस्ट कि पढ़ा, नोट्स बनाए एंड याद किया एंड हो गया, नहीं। थिंक अबाउट देम, डिस्कस अबाउट देम, बी क्रिएटिव। मेरा मिशन सिर्फ एक है कि आप स्टडीज को, बायोलॉजी को एंजॉय करो, उससे डरो नहीं, एंड बायोलॉजी should give you happiness, and आप लोग you become the future scientists. This is all for now. I will meet you in the next video. Until then,